Hello everyone. Today I'll be taking up Cnidaria, one of the exciting phylums of invertebrates. I'm Dr. Vanita from Mahindra University and I'll lead you to Cnidaria or Coelenterata. This phylum Cnidaria or Coelenterata, the name indicates the presence of cnidoblast cells. So these are the cells present which adds to the name Cnidaria, and it is one of the most colorful of the different phylums of animal kingdom, and it includes many species living in aquatic forms, of which many are marine and few are freshwater. On the whole, it includes around 9,000 species. When we have a look at the characteristics of cnidarians, the habit and habitat, as we have seen, it is mostly aquatic and marine as well as freshwater, and these are also free swimming, and some species, some genus we also find the sessile form. Sessile means stationary, they are stationary at one point. And level of organization, we find tissue level of organization, and this is a higher level of organization in this phylum. As we see, the earlier phylum called the protozoans were only cellular level of organization. From protozoans, as we come to coelentrates, we have here the tissue level of organization. Symmetry, when we have a look at the symmetry of coelentrates, these are radial symmetrical. That means their bodies are divisible into left and right halves through any plane passing through the center of the body. That means when the body is cut through the center, we find the same portion at the left and the right halves. So this is called as radial symmetrical. When we see about the germ layers of cnidarians, these are diploblastic. So when we say as diploblastic, it means that the body is divided into two embryonic germ layers, which is the ectoderm and the endoderm. So these two characteristically give the term as diploblastic. In addition, we also find an undifferentiated mesoglia present in between the ectoderm and endoderm. These are acoelomate. There is no coelom present in these animals, and the central cavity is called as the gastrovascular cavity. The digestion, when we have a look at the digestive system in cnidarians, we find an incomplete digestive system, as the digestive system is very simple. They have a gastrovascular cavity and having a single opening where food is taken in as well as the waste is expelled from that particular opening. And the digestion is both extracellular and intracellular. As we have seen, the gastrovascular cavity is having the lining where as any kind of food material enters the body, there is some kind of digestion happening inside the gastrovascular cavity. So this is intracellular digestion. Extracellular digestion, we mean that the tentacles of these genus, they are having cnidoblast. They release the digestive enzymes where they digest the food particle, and which is again taken in by the organism. So as the digestion is happening outside the body, these are extracellular digestion. So nutrition is holozoic, and these are carnivorous in nature, and by the help of tentacles they tend to take the smaller zooplankton and then they engulf it. Excretion takes place by the general body surface through diffusion. So this is a common phenomena found in coelentrates, where the body surface takes in charge of diffusion. Through diffusion, there is some kind of exchange of the waste material and which is excreted by diffusion. Respiration is also very simple, mainly by diffusion through the body surface. These organisms are ammoniotelic, and ammonia is the nitrogenous waste expelled in these organisms. When we see the kind of organisms, ammonia being the most primitive kind of nitrogenous waste expelled. So as we find this, the second phylum among the invertebrates we find these are ammonotelic, and ammonia being the nitrogenous waste. Organisms have exoskeleton, and these organisms are the corals. The corals are colorful organisms having hard calcareous exoskeleton, and these are present in coral reefs in different kinds of different oceans through the globe. And other than corals, we don't find calcareous exoskeleton in other kinds of coelenterids. When we happen to look at the nervous system is quite primitive, consisting of network of non-polar nerve cells or neurons and their processes. In addition, we also find statocysts, which are present as a sense organ of balance. So, when we happen to see the reproduction in coelenterids, we find both sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction is found. And when we see about sexual reproduction, we find there is formation of gametes are there, and in asexual reproduction we find budding, which is often found in the organism which are stationary and which are held, and they often reproduce by budding, and this is a form of asexual reproduction. Asexual buds are released, and then when they are freely floating, they again give rise to another organism. There is a large aspect of regeneration present. Whenever any part of the body is cut, it is quickly regenerated. So this is also a characteristic feature of coelenterids. And development is indirect in them, which means that the larvae is formed. Larval stages are formed. For example, in Obelia, the larvae is called planula larvae, which is a free living larvae. And in Aurelia, the larvae is called as the Ephyra larvae. So we are having different kinds of larvae for different genus. Now, cnidoblast, we have specialized organs called as the cnidocytes present, and these cnidocytes are also called as cnidoblasts. It consists of hypnotoxin fluid, which is also the nematocyst or the stinging capsule. So, as an organism or any kind of food particle or any kind of zooplankton is moving in water, it quickly stings that particular zooplankton and releases hypnotoxin filled capsule such that it harms the prey and engulfs it in the body. So, these are present in the tentacles. The tentacles has number of cnidocytes. And the function of cnidocytes are also anchorage, attaching, defense and capturing the prey. So these are primordial functions of cnidocytes. As we know, these are present in tentacles, serving the function of capturing the prey or attaching firmly to the surface, and also helping the organism in defense mechanism from the harmful organism. One of the characteristic feature exhibited in cnidarians are that they exhibit polymorphism. Polymorphism is a feature which means the organism exhibits two body forms which are polyp and medusae. That means the organisms exhibit totally two different forms in its life cycle. So polyp is a cylindrical and sessile form. So cylindrical, and it is a stationary form which is attached to the surface, and sometimes these stationary forms also are in colonies, they are together, or sometimes these are also solitary, that means they live singly, and their mouth are directed upwards. As we see a cylindrical structure, mouth at the beginning, and then we have number of tentacles as we see in Hydra, Adamsia and medusae form. And when we find the polyp, half of the life cycle and half of the life cycle is medusae. The medusae is some sort of an umbrella shaped structure, and it is free swimming. Sea and ocean, we find medusae swimming around and floating freely, and they are solitary, moving around freely. Their mouth is directed inwards. And the examples of medusae are Aurelia, jellyfishes. So, according to the different organisms, we find polyp stage dominant in few species and medusae stage dominant in few genus. We also find some stages permanent in some of the genus. And this kind of characteristic feature of exhibiting polymorphism is called metagenesis, where we find totally different forms of the same species. So, metagenesis is a process of alternation of generation in which polyp produces medusae by asexual reproduction and medusae produces polyp by sexual reproduction. So, we find alternation of generation. One phase of their life cycle is asexual reproduction and the other phase is the sexual reproduction. Example, in Obelia, both polyp and medusae phases are diploid. So, metagenesis is one of the characteristic feature of coelentrates. When we see the classification of coelenterata, it is divided into three major classes: Hydrozoa, Scyphozoa and Anthozoa. Hydrozoa consists of Hydra, Obelia, Phacelia. So, these are the stages where we find polyp stage more common, and they also have the medusae stage, but polyp is more dominant in Hydrozoa. In Scyphozoa, we find medusae stage more dominant, and as we find in Aurelia, and these are the jellyfishes. Aurelia are also called as a moon jellyfish. So, these jellyfishes are floating and they look very, very delicate and very beautiful. Anthozoa or Actinozoa. In the third class, we find Adamsia, the sea anemone, and corals. These are often stationary and sessile. Sea anemone, we find number of tentacles and fixed at one point, and coral reefs, we find so many different kinds of corals with hard calcareous exoskeleton coming under this particular class, which is Anthozoa. We come to now the type study of Aurelia or the jellyfish. As you can see the beautiful picture of jellyfish Aurelia. The classification, we find Animalia is a kingdom, phylum is Cnidaria, class is Scyphozoa, order is Cymestome, family is Almaridae, and genus is Aurelia. And there are number of species of Aurelia, of which some of the important species of Aurelia or the moon jellyfish are Aurelia aurita, colpata, Aurelia labita, Aurelia limbata, Aurelia maldivinensis solida. So, these are some of the important species of Aurelia, while we find quite number of species of Aurelia. Coming to the morphology, the morphology looks very beautiful, having umbrella shaped structure, and the center of the subumbellar surface bears a short and conspicuous manubrium. At the distal end of the manubrium is situated a square mouth, and from each corner of the square mouth long tapering frilled delicate processes called the oral arms hang downwards. So, you can see the four different kinds of oral arms which are hanging downwards. In addition, we find these arms have ciliated grooves. You can find the ciliated grooves, and which also lead into the mouth. And the edges of the groove consist of nematocyst. As we know, the function of nematocyst is to capture the prey or to prevent the organism from harmful predators. So, these nematocysts are present in these four in the grooves present in these arms. So, we also find gonads which are present, velarium, marginal lappet. So, as we look a closer towards a morphological structure, we find subgenital pits which are present. Each of the interradius bears circular aperture on the subumbellar surface, which leads into small cavity called a subgenital pit. The gonads are present, so gonads are quite easily visible. You can see the four gonads are present just above the genital pit, which are horseshoe shaped. Then we find the lappets which are present. These are circular margins of umbrella is broken into 8 lobes by 8 notches. Each of these notches has two delicate leaf-like processes called the marginal lappets. So we also find between the lappet secretory organ called as the rhopalium. So this is one of the tentaculocyst present and also a characteristic feature of coelenterate. And we also find the margin of the subumbellar surface bearing lappets and tentacles forms the flexible flap called as velarium. So the Aurelia is commonly called as moon jellies, and it was first described by Lamarck in his book The Natural History of Invertebrates. As we see the geographical range where these are present northern hemispheres of Atlantic, Pacific and Indian Ocean, also found in Europe and different sea like Red Sea, Tokyo Bay, and these participate in blooms, and we find number of blooms present of these jellyfishes. They are moving along with the water. They tend to be of different varieties of sizes. They range from 5 centimeter to 38 centimeters, and they feed on zooplankton, small fishes and several other larvae. As we have seen, coelentrates are radial symmetrical, so these jellyfishes are also radially symmetrical, and they have umbrella like structure, oral arms and tentacles with stinging cells. So one of the characteristic feature is the bioluminescent feature shown by these organisms, and it means that they produce their own light, and it gives a very beautiful structure when light is emitted from these jellyfishes as they move around. When we have a look at the reproduction stage of Aurelia, the medusa stage of jellyfishes produces sexual reproduction. You can see in the picture we find medusa stage where the male releases strings of sperms and female ingests them. And once the ciliated larvae develop from the egg, they settle on and near the seafloor and develop into benthic polyps. These polyps then reproduce asexually and bud into ephyrae larvae, which later turn into medusae. So we can find medusae giving rise to the sexual reproduction and forming the zygote, which are in turn forming the larvae, and these are giving these are forming the planular larvae, and these planular larvae are giving rise to the young polyps. And these polyps, when they grow by asexual reproduction, they give rise to number of ephyrae larvae, which later on become the medusae. So like this we find in the life cycle of Aurelia, the reproduction having medusae stage and polyp stage, and alternation of generation is there. And the characteristic feature of Aurelia is that a medusa stage dominates in Aurelia, having the jellyfish which are floating, and these organisms are also very colorful and of different sizes. As you have seen, the sizes are from 5 centimeter to ranging from 25 centimeters also. So this is one of the exciting phylums of the invertebrates animal kingdom, and many of them are also ornamentally used. As we have seen in coelentrates, corals are one of the classes which are the anthozoans, which are also ornamentally used and in different ways, and other species are free floating or sessile. We also have the Great Barrier Reef, where we find number of corals present belonging to coelentrates. So coelentrates are in fact one of the exciting phylums to study, and one can really feel that from protozoans, coelentrates are having a higher kind of evolutionary perspective of studying it, and we find an advanced features in coelentrates when compared to the protozoans. As we sum up cnidarians, we find they mostly marine and few are freshwater organisms, radial symmetry and diploblastic nature. They exhibit polymorphism, alternation of generation is there, bioluminescence is there, and they include wide variety of aquatic organisms from corals, hydra, sea anemone and the jellyfishes. So, by this, I would like to conclude by saying that coelentrates are one of the classes of one of the phylum of animal kingdom invertebrates, where they are most colorful organisms living in the ocean, living in the sea, rivers, having floating and different kinds of shapes, and one of the beautiful organisms found in the invertebrate phylum, invertebrate kingdom. So I feel exciting aspects in dealing with cnidarians and coelentrates. So coelentrates strikes as one of the most colorful phylum to me, because these are also some of the ornamental use of some of the organisms among the coelentrates. So by this I would like to conclude, and I wish good luck to many of you who are reading coelentrates, and you can have a look at many number of videos which are also present in YouTube about coelentrates, and you can find number of colorful organisms and dive into these organisms to know more about them. Thank you one and all.